What's going on, guys? So in front of you is a product that most RVers with 50 amp service need, but they don't even realize that they need it. But even though you need it, you still have to be very careful when using it. Let's talk about this because this is not a normal cable for an RV and why you might need this for your setup. Hang tight, I'll be right back. So in front of you, you were looking at a relatively unique cable. And this isn't groundbreakingly unique. This is just relatively unique because you don't typically see this. This is a cable that has a 30 amp connection on your shore power side and a 50 amp connection on your RV side. And a lot of people would say, why do you need a cable like this? The reality of RVs these days is that the more efficient RV air conditionings become, the more likely that you're able to operate more than one of them off of a 30 amp connection, which really makes it convenient when you are trying to avoid carrying around a super thick 50 amp cable, because a 50 amp cable is roughly twice the diameter and about 3 times the weight of a 30 amp cable. So I've been using a cable like this for some time. And the reason why I have this new one in front of me, courtesy of the folks over at eTrailer.com, who's my official channel sponsor, they carry these cables as well as a variety of other types of cables. But the reason why I now have this cable is because I had to modify the previous one that I had to be able to accommodate a different type of plug that worked with the Forest River Surveyor RV. And I missed that cable. That cable was absolutely fantastic because with the upgrade to the new AC units that we have in the Brookstone, I'm able to run 2 of those AC units off of 30 amps. I don't need 50 amps worth of power to do it because they ramp up really gradually in terms of amperage. Because a lot of folks out there are upgrading their AC units to Furrion Chill Cubes or Turbo or a number of other brands of ACs, the Torso AC, these different brands that are available now that pull very little power, are super efficient, and at the same time are able to operate off of a 30 amp cable. Again, essentially eliminating the need to carry this huge 50 amp cable around with you. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to operate other things like perhaps your AC units along with your microwave and a hair dryer and a coffee maker and all those things. You still have to keep an eye on how much amperage you're pulling from your system because you still may need a 50 amp cable. But there's a lot of folks who don't need that anymore, and a cable like this is great because you don't have to use all sorts of different adapters and plugs in order to make it work. So let's go ahead and take this out to the Brookstone. We'll get this one plugged in so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the 50 amp cable that we currently have connected to the RV. This one is only, I think we got this one in 15 feet. So it's a relatively short cable, mainly because we're super close to the box here. We do have this really cool Active Start, Advanced EMS Soft Start kit that's here to feed the RV, which further reduces the startup surge on the 50 amp connection we have here. But what I want to do is I want to go to a smaller cable overall. Now, I'm still going to have to use an adapter here because in our power box we don't have a 30 amp plug here. So I'm going to have to reduce from 50 to 30 amps in order to make this part work. But in most RV campgrounds, you are going to have a 30 amp and a 50 amp connection. So let's go ahead and get our little dog bone adapter plugged in here, and then we'll run the cable. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, shut off power. And then we're going to unplug the 50 amp connection. Plug in my 50 to 30 amp dog bone adapter here. Next, we're going to connect the 30 amp plug into that. We're going to go ahead and unscrew our 50 amp cable here. And just to kind of show you the difference, that's a 50 amp cable, that's a 30 amp cable. Again, if you need a 50 amp cable in your RV, you shouldn't do this. But if you've swapped your ACs out and you no longer have that startup surge, you may not need that to run virtually everything. Just again, keep in mind what you are running. Twist lock that in place. We are good to go. And real quickly before we turn power back on, that's the 30 amp cable, that's the 50 amp cable. This cable is super, super heavy, very bulky, takes up a lot of room, and again, if you don't need it, it's super inconvenient to use. However, if you do need it, of course, you're going to want to maintain carrying it and using it. This is just, again, for an example where you can run your RV ACs that don't require the startup surge as most of them, and then just be cautious of what else you plan on running because you do not want to overload your cable. All right, then we will turn power back on, and we should be in good shape now. And as we go in the RV, again, you have to remember what's groundbreaking about this isn't the fact that this cable is super rare. It's the fact that it is difficult to find in most cases. You have to specifically hunt it down. And now that we have it in place, we have our power back on in here. That's plugged into 110 power. My little dehumidifier is plugged into 110. One of my cameras in here is. And the AC is running. So again, the power behind this is just the fact that it gives you that type of flexibility. And with the Furrion Chill Cube back here, and the fact that we have the torso AC up front, it's going to give us that capability of running both of those. Now I do have to keep this one off. Even though this is a quite cool, high efficiency Coleman, it still is going to start up with more of a surge than the Chill Cube as well as the torso that we have up front. So what you have to understand is you have to understand how much power you're actually using, what that startup surge looks like, which typically these are going to have a pretty dang high startup surge, and if your cable's not going to be too small with wire that's not going to be thick enough in terms of gauge to be able to allow the amperage and current you need. So you need to do the math, in other words. You need to add up your amperage, add up what you're specifically using. If you plan on running, you know, a microwave, your refrigerator, your ACs, your hair dryer, your, you know, all sorts of other high amperage appliances at the same time, you still may very well need a 50 amp connection. So understanding what everything pulls in your RV and how that impacts the type of cable you need is going to be critically important. Don't just go out and buy a 30 amp cable because it's smaller in diameter, lighter weight, and more convenient. Only get one if you know what kind of power needs your RV has, and you want to be sure that you don't overheat that cable because you can cause a lot of issues, including and up to a fire if you're not careful. So again, the whole point of this video is just to let those of you who have done that research know they make a 30 amp cable that has a 50 amp plug on it. So you have the ability to get something like that, which a lot of people don't. They just buy their adapters for their 50 amp cable, or they get a 50 amp cable in general and they just deal with it. And this is just a way for you to deal with less weight and bulk if you understand the electrical current in your RV and if you don't need that super thick, heavy 50 amp cable. Anyways, I'll throw a link in the description of this video if that's something you're interested in. I'm super glad that the folks at eTrailer carry that in several different lengths. Again, also understand that the longer the cable, the thicker it needs to be as well. So 50 amp cable might be the right cable for you, but for us, I don't really need it out here. So I'm in good shape using that 30 amp cable, which is a lot smaller and easier to carry around. Anyways, guys, sure hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up. We'll talk to you again very soon.